And thank you both again so much for taking the time to talk with me today. But before we jump into why we get to talk, which is Blood of Zeus, 2020 is currently wrapping up. And I think, honestly, for most people, probably pretty happy to put this year behind us. But since this is the first time I'm getting to talk to you this year, how has 2020 been for the both of you?
Dave, it's been obviously a very tough year for everyone. We consider ourselves lucky, because, being a writer, we have an office, but we've worked in solitary situations before. So, obviously our heart kind of goes out to all the people that, have lost loved ones, people that have lost jobs. We hate to see the country kind of fractured and suffering, and that is tough. But truthfully, we consider ourselves lucky. Everyone is healthy. We have a job. We have no complaints. We're not sitting in LA traffic. We haven't missed dinner at home with our families in a while. So, while that sucks, we're making the best of it. And we always just say, thankfully, we had family that during World War II in Greece, during the, German occupation, 1 in every 10 Greeks, died of starvation. And it's like, we have a full fridge. We have Netflix. It's okay. If this is our hard time, and that was 5 years, if this is our hard time, we got to suck it up and just deal with it.
As writers too, Dave, part of the job is how you frame things, because there's rejection in this industry. And so we always try to frame things as positively as we can. I second everything that Charlie said. And then, what we try to do as much as we can, sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail. We just try to hone in on the positive. And one of the positives of 2020 is that we were busy. We were working on a pilot for MGM, and we had a couple other jobs that we were working on. So we were blessed in that sense. We were blessed that we have our families, and as Charlie mentioned, thank God, everyone is healthy and well. So we just try to focus on the positive as much as we can. But it does sadden us to see the country so polarized and see the country kind of going through what they're going through. But it also afforded us the opportunity and time to spend more time with our family too. We're in the office, we work late hours, and we were able to be home with our families for dinner, which is kind of rare. And so again, everything is how you perceive it. We try to take this and try to make it and focus on the positive as much as we can.
I will say, across the board, anytime I get to talk to folks, especially involved in animation like yourselves, animation has kind of been a silver lining for a lot of people this year. It's provided an opportunity to, continue writing, to continue production, because a lot of that stuff can be done remotely, even if it's not really ideal. Charlie and I were talking a little bit offline about sort of the how that impacted your production process. So did any of the kind of shakeups, did it really impact production of Blood of Zeus all that much, or were you able to just kind of, weather the storm, so to speak, and just carry forward? How did that work out for you in 2020?
There was definitely an initial slowdown when the initial kind of shelter at home order came in here in California. And so I think it slowed down our speed, the rate at which we work, I'd say maybe 10%, because now, it's just not like everyone's in the office. You just pop in, we have an editorial question, we have a design question. Let's go talk to our director. We're not all in the same space. But we were able to continue to work. And I think once we kind of put systems in place where we could communicate better and share files better, we were able to continue forward. So that's the great thing about animation. We were able to continue to work. It did slow us down. I think the great kind of irony in all of this is that our overseas, all the boards were done here in LA and in Austin, Texas, but the overseas animation was in South Korea. And if you guys remember, initially, one of the first outbreaks was there. And I was asking Mike, our producer, Mike, is this going to be a problem? We know Don Wu, they're working on episodes. Let's see, don't worry. They said they're okay. It's not a problem in Seoul where they are. And the irony is that I was worried about them, but then we got shut down before they never got shut down. We were the ones that got sent home. So you don't know, but thankfully you can do animation, even under these circumstances.
It retarded the process, but thank God it didn't shut it down. So we feel very blessed, whereas in the live action space, it literally brought production to a halt. Yeah. And we feel for those people and the people involved with this production. So again, we feel very blessed that it slowed us down, but we kept, kept moving ahead, kept forging ahead. So we were very lucky to be working in this space during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And now kind of going back in time to maybe some happier times a little bit. Maybe take me back to the early days of Blood of Zeus. I know once upon a time when it was announced, it was under the title of Gods and Heroes. But walk me back to when the project first started up. And then in addition to the title change, like what kind of changed along the way from your initial ideas to the final product we can see on Netflix now?
Dave, we were just very lucky. This is Charlie. This was just an idea we always kind of had in our back pocket. It was born out of this, I guess you would call it a failed pitch because it was a pitch we didn't sell. But we always believed, and we told our agent, we thought it'd be cool to kind of do a Greek mythology anthology show, kind of like in the vein of American Horror Story, where you take one season and you take 10 episodes to really delve into these stories. And it all began with this story we wanted to tell about Icarus and Daedalus, his father, who was this kind of amazing character, kind of Tony Stark, weapons inventor that was accused of murder and had to go on the run. And through kind of fleshing out that idea and figuring out what the other seasons of that show would be, we kind of stumbled upon these two myths where we said, like, if you took half of that story and half of this story, that'd really be pretty cool. And so it just so happened, and we just kept talking about that idea. We wrote some of it out almost as like a short story, and then we were lucky enough that we had a general meeting at Netflix one day with John Derderian, who's in charge of their anime division. He's the guy that actually, for anyone out there who loves Castlevania, they have John to thank, because he was the one behind that show as well.
Right.
And he said, listen, do you have anything in the mythological space or public domain space that you think might work as an anime show? And we said, well, actually, there's this one idea we had, about a bastard son of Zeus and how it all unfolds. And we pitched him the idea, and he really responded to it. And he asked us to kind of write it up. And after we wrote it up, he said to me, he said, listen, I really like this. And he said, if you write the pilot, the first episode, which is like 20 to 22 pages, and a 10-page Bible kind of explaining the arc of the first season, if you do that and I like it, I promise not only to buy it, but I'll make it. And thankfully, it was just, what's great about Netflix is that they do give you a great executive, a creative executive, Brandon Mattingly, who, would read every script and give us notes, but they really just kind of let us tell the story we wanted to tell. And I don't know if we're going to get into spoilers or not, but the fundamental bones of the story kind of remained what they were at the outset. They remained all the way through, with the exception of John's one big note is that this has to be epic and it has to end with a bigger battle. And so that's something we literally had epic, just like on a postcard over our desk. Epic. Every time we spoke with John, he just kept reiterating that. So thankfully, in that sense, this was an idea that was just inherently strong and kind of wrote itself.
And I would add to that, too. We feel indebted to John Derderian because he had the guts to greenlight the show. He also had the foresight that there would be an appeal for this show, that audiences would like it and accept it. The reception has been very good, and now everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. They're like, oh, what a great idea. Why didn't anyone think of, making an anime in the space of Greek mythology? And now it all seems so obvious. But at that time, it hadn't been done. And at that time, it was a risk because most often, even as Charlie had mentioned, a lot of the animes that were made were animes that were basically made from big IPs, video game IPs. Now, Greek mythology does have an awareness, but it was still untested. And so the fact that John said, you know what, I believe in this, I think that there's an audience for this, and took a gamble on our show, means a lot to us. And I also think, again, with regards to him, it really shows that he had some guts and some foresight, and we're again very grateful that he rolled the dice on the show.
Even for people that love Castlevania, we love that show. That wasn't a slam dunk when you kind of look at it from afar. If you go back to when he greenlit it, because as you know, like a lot of video game adaptations to movies and TV shows, they haven't been that successful.
Right.
But John, we give him credit. Like, if he believes in something, he'll roll the dice.
You guys have definitely hit the epic note out of the park, especially with that last. I mean, not just from like a Greek epics, but I mean like that entire last battle was just like jaw on the floor, kind of just like what is going to happen next kind of thing. Just for that whole final episode, which we'll get into spoilers in a little bit here. But talking about kind of mythology, Blood of Zeus, you kind of have a mixed bag of classic tales that you know of, sort of ones that you mentioned earlier. But you guys have definitely added your own kind of spin to the story, your own new characters created, I think, just for this show. So can you talk about deciding what to keep and what to add in to kind of freshen things up? What was your story breaking process like?
As writers, we always ask ourselves questions and we say, well, what if this happened or what if that happened? And so one of the questions we had asked ourselves was, or basically to backtrack it, I would say that we knew that these mythological tales were oral tradition. It was an oral tradition. And if it was an oral tradition, then some of these weren't transcribed. And if some of these maybe weren't transcribed, what if we postulate that our story is one of these lost tales? And that gave us a creative license to take the story where we wanted to take it. And I think some of the fun of the show is, if you are familiar with Greek mythology, you can look at the show and say, oh, they took that Greek myth and then they spun it this way, or they did it. This is one that is true to the Greek mythological tales, but this is something that they added. And with regards to what we kept and what we added, it was a kind of back and forth where we were just kind of talking about, okay, here's our main character, here's our protagonist, and what's the most compelling story to tell. In addition to that, John told us you have 8 episodes to tell your story. So we almost had to reverse engineer. We had to say, okay, it's going to basically, there's going to be a climactic moment here, and then this is kind of the real estate that we have to work with. And we almost kind of went backwards and kind of, that gave us a rough kind of spine to work from.
And to be honest, Dave, some of it is just out of pure necessity because, we've pitched different iterations of Greek mythology and different stories. And when you kind of, stick too close to the original stories, even when the executive will say that they have an affinity for Greek mythology, that they love Greek mythology, you can just see that their physicality change, and they kind of feel like, oh, kind of, this has been there, done that. Mm-hmm. And so, we almost had to say, like, well, listen, if this is a lost tale, then we can use the tropes and the archetypes and some of the characterizations that people know and love about Greek mythology, but it can still feel fresh and still feel like, oh, this is something that, this isn't the 10th iteration of Hercules that we've seen. And so some of it was out of just sheer necessity to kind of, get our foot in the door, to get past the gatekeepers. And then also, too, truthfully, we love Greek mythology, and there's parts of it that we do want to honor and stay true to. So it then becomes this kind of amalgamation of the two, if that makes sense.
What I would also add, and it also became, it came down to, okay, dramatic construction and journey for our characters. Right. And then those became the focus. But building to that, dramatic construction, what is actually building, or what, or how are we tracking our characters, their emotional journeys? And then that forced us to kind of go down a certain path. And that helped us, say, okay, this part of the original myth we don't need, because that's not building the dramatic construct in this particular story. That's not furthering the character's journey, whichever character that may be, whichever character we were exploring at that time. So that helped bring things into focus as well.
Yeah, and I love how you guys, you played with the conventions a little bit too, and there was some occasional misdirection. We're going to get into some spoilers now too for our listeners out there, so make sure you guys have watched all 8 episodes and watch them again a second time. But say, for example, a Minotaur shows up, and classically you think like, okay, there's going to be a maze, there's maybe going to be a chase, there's maybe going to be a battle. But no, that thread is taken out almost immediately, and the characters just kind of like push forward and do their own thing. I love little things like that where you have nods to classic mythology, but then you have your own specific twist on it that you're like, okay, well, I don't know where we're going next, but I'm excited to get there.
No, it's just so funny you say that because this classics professor reached out to us on Twitter, and he's like, I appreciated all the little nods, and he ran through like a gambit of ones that he spotted. But he goes, but what was nice? He goes, I got to watch something in the world of Greek mythology, and I didn't know where the story was going.
Exactly.
And we just thought that was just like a really nice kind of thing because this is someone who teaches this. And I guess partly it's like, if you're doing the Odyssey, you know where the story ends, unless you really kind of, divert from it. So that was just kind of I think that landed even better than we had hoped.
Definitely. And I like that you have the lost tales too. So you kind of have that built-in freedom to play around and stay in that world and stay with those characters, but do your own thing. And specifically one of those characters, which you kind of have to build a Greek legend that's going to stand the test of time. You kind of have to build that around a heroic protagonist. So can you talk about Heron? And specifically, I'm wondering how you chose that specific name, and maybe you can allude to some of the significance of that name on his journey.
Yeah, Heron is in Greek translates to hero, and as Charlie always mentions too, the hero's journey was something that we knew we were going to explore with the show. I think it's important, when it comes to writing a character, to draw from experiences. This story was a very personal story for us. We grew up immigrants, Greek immigrants. We saw our parents at times being ostracized, minimized to a certain extent, even though we at times, we would go to school at times and we would bring the spanakopita in, and then people would look at us and they would smell and they felt we were a little weird. And so we ourselves felt ostracized at times. And Heron is the quintessential outsider. And we wanted to explore what that feels like, what that is, for a character to experience. And he's ostracized and he's a bastard and he's angry. And I would say that he also is one of the characters where we explored this theme of anger and how he deals with his anger, and then how anger can destroy a person, or if they let it go, they can become the best version of themselves. And in becoming the best version of themselves, they can overcome the adversity they're pitted against. And we explored that in 3 characters, Heron being one, Seraphim being in the one where he can't let go of his anger, and that becomes his downfall. His anger is his downfall. And then with Hera, her anger pushes her to go too far, where she realizes, like, oh my God, what have I done? And it changes her in a way, God willing, if we have a season 2, we'll be able to explore that. So it starts from a very personal place. We drew upon our personal experiences, and then obviously, we weren't ostracized or as Heron was, but that was like the jumping off point. And I think that it makes him relatable, because I think everyone in their life at one time feels like they're an outsider. Even if they're in a certain group, they feel like maybe they don't quite fit in, or they're made to feel weird, or they're even minimalized. In a way. So the character evolved from personal experiences and wanting to explore the hero's journey. And what would you have to say? We also feel,
Dave, I was just going to say that, we love, I know the hero with 1,000 faces, we live in a very cynical time that's maybe kind of frowned upon, these days, but, it's tried and true, and it works for a reason. And part of it is, obviously Lucas has been, very clear about how that inspired him in Star Wars, and all he did was take the hero's journey and put it in the sci-fi world. And then we grew up watching that, loving that. And we think it's time to kind of pull it back into the mythological sword and sandal, world.
Yeah.
And since we did feel we wanted, like, all right, Greek mythology, it's always, there's always elements of tragedy or epic natured stories. What better setting to do the hero's journey again, to put our own kind of spin on it? And if we are doing the hero's journey, what better name than Heron, which literally translates in Greek to hero? And then it also kind of fits the mold, like when Hercules was born, he was named after Hera to try and appease her, to calm her down for another one of, Zeus's infidelities. And while that's not the case in our story, we felt like, and it kind of fits that mold of, Heron, Hercules, like the bastard, children of Zeus. And so it just seemed to be one of those things where, like, this just feels right, for what all the things we're trying to do and the dynamics we're exploring. It felt like a good choice.
Dave, if I may add, I just want to just say something. Just as storytellers, we feel it's important also to, leave a good message with an audience without being preachy, God willing. Hopefully we've earned it. And we spoke to a critic that had seen the show, and this made us feel really good. She basically said, listen, I'm Mexican, in Texas. I feel minimized. I feel, and I'm angry. I'm so angry. And what I loved about your show was that I saw Heron dealing with that anger, and it reminded me that I have to let that anger go. I have to take that anger and I have to use it in a positive way to help be the best version of myself. And that's what I came away with. And that when she said that to us, it made us feel so good. Because if you can, bring a story into a world and you can entertain people, and there's a lot of graphic violence in there, and there's a lot of gruesome components to the show, but there's also this, I would hope that people come away with this inspirational component. And if you can say something good, even if it's a subtle message, that just makes us feel good as storytellers.
No, I love that. And I'll take it a step further with a little anecdote of my own. When I heard, Heron was the name of the character. So I was like, okay, I wanted to look that up, and I like to know, because I'm a writer myself. So I tend to cram as much kind of meaning into every word that you can, right? So I was looking up heron and kind of like what it was related to. And obviously I came across the bird. And in a lot of sort of beliefs or spirituality, the heron kind of stands for tranquility. And then I'm watching this character. I'm like, well, maybe it's not that, because he's not exactly tranquil for most of the story. But then it actually had a lot of meaning at the end, where it was like tranquility, kind of that inner peace is super important to this character's journey at the end. Even if it's sort of momentary, that's the sort of transformative moment. So I was like, well, even if that's not the intended meaning, I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah.
But you know what, Dave, though? It touches on something Vlas and I talk about a lot. Like, we live in the age of the anti-hero, and kind of because that is kind of the going trend. Then what you have to do is that if your main character and your protagonist is an anti-hero, then the villain has to be an even worse guy. You know what I mean? And so, like, in Breaking Bad, Walter White, we all love Walter White. So that they bring in Gus Fring, because he's not just a drug dealer, he's like in the cartel, and he's really bad, or like we always talk about, everything always goes back to the Sopranos. Yeah, like, all right, Tony Soprano's a gangster, then we're going to bring in Richie Aprile, because he's a really bad gangster. And so part of it is that, like, if you're going to not choose to do an anti-hero story, and we're going to do the hero's journey, then we better surround it, because we live in this kind of, cynical, nihilistic time. We have to then have like lots of like chaos around it and hope that we can get away with it, because there's still value in trying to find peace, in trying to do the right thing. Now, that might be viewed by some people as too kind of pat now, but this idea of finding peace, finding tranquility, that's something that tranquility is a story we need to find, and we still need to tell these stories. And there's a reason that, Greek mythology, they're not parables like, in the Judeo-Christian ethic, but they are meant to be lessons, and that people took them as lessons. So part of it is like, that was part of the conversation, that we want to try and have this positive message, and this is what we should strive for. And the gods said we should strive for excellence and peace and tranquility. But then, can you still tell that story in 2020? And to be honest, we weren't sure, but we think we got away with it.
I got to say, then, the flip side of that coin, which is talking about an anti-hero, talking about not being able to let go of anger, can you talk a bit about Seraphim? Obviously that name has some religious significance. So how did you come up with that character, who I think is a really interesting and tragic and kind of tortured character to follow through this journey? It was just as enjoyable for me to watch Seraphim's journey as it was for Heron and the rest of our heroes. So can you talk about Seraphim a little bit?
He was the most fun character.
I bet.
Well, he was the most fun character to write. Mm-hmm. He was, we had a blast writing him, and again, it was just exploring anger and what that can do and how that. But the beauty of Seraphim, Charley always says this, and I totally agree with him. We don't have evil characters; we have antagonists, mm-hmm. and what we try to do is what Perkin does. We spend time and we really figure out what does each character want, and then how they go about getting what they want to find their character. And so I feel like people understand what Seraphim wants, and they can relate to his journey. And I'll let Charlie take it from here, but he was just a blast to write.
And part of it is that, you know, there is a translation of Seraphim in ancient Greek that translates to the burnt one or the scarred one. Yeah. And so for us, that was always the kind of genesis of this character. Like we always say, sometimes in life, you know, the gods smile down on you, and sometimes they conspire against you. And for Seraphim, like, everything just conspired against this guy. Everything broke bad, and everything went against him. And we just thought that would just be a really cool kind of character to be kind of a mirror to Heron, who, not that things went well for Heron, but because of obviously their relationship and dynamic, it would just be cool to see these two kind of opposites come together. And that was really at the heart of his character for us.
And if I would like, I want to also add that I feel sometimes in life, people are a product of circumstance, you know, and you look at sometimes, say a criminal, and you say, oh, that's a bad person. And when you look at that person's history and you see how they got to that point in their life, sometimes, and it doesn't in any way, you know, we all need to be held accountable for our actions. We believe in that. But there are times when I feel that the circumstances that people live in, their life and their fate and their destiny in a way, and there's something about that's inherently tragic, and you know, we wanted to explore that, how what happened to Seraphim brought about that monster, and it was just something that was just very interesting to us, and just from the reception that we've been getting from audiences, I would say he's probably one of the most favorite characters, and that's been gratifying to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's definitely one of my favorite characters to kind of watch, and the way that the past and the tragic events of his past, and again, the gods from all angles conspiring against him were revealed. It was you know, it was tragic, and just kind of like, just really felt for the guy. But then he also had multiple chances to you know, come clean at the end. And decided not to, for, you know, and then his fate is sort of, I don't know if it's sealed. I don't know if it's left to be determined. I guess we'll have to find out. Another character I was super interested in finding more about was Alexia. So I wasn't sure, like, are we going to get another demigod backstory? Are we going to get an exploration of the sort of the Amazon culture? Did you guys ever consider bringing more of that into the mix?
We had her backstory in the show, and it got cut at the last minute. We ran out of real estate. It killed us. It killed us right up until the very end. And one of the biggest challenge, and you know, I think Charlie may agree with this, is that these scripts are 22 pages, 20 pages. You only have so much real estate, and so you have Seraphim, you have Heron, you have Zeus, you have Hera, and we just ran out of real estate. That one kills us. If God willing, we're afforded it the second season, we're definitely going to bring that backstory in, and we're going to explore further. But there was some of that in season one that just got cut out at the end, and I wish that didn't happen. And I wish we could have given her due and given her that moment, and not just for her, for some, even the other, you know, secondary God characters. It's just that we ran out of real estate. You know that as a writer, you know, when you have an ensemble, it's hard to service everyone, and the easiest thing to do is just to lose a couple characters, because then you can hone in on the ones that are left. But we totally hear you on that, and we do have her backstory, and we just hope and pray that we're afforded a second season so we can explore that further.
And you know, Dave, to be honest, the 100% complete truth, that stuff was written, and some of it we even boarded. What happened was, initially when we were writing the scripts, you know, and I think to their credit, I think this was in benefit of the show. We asked Netflix, hey, is it okay if we write, you know, 26 or, you know, 27 page episodes? They're like, yeah, just let your imagination run free. Go, just write whatever you want. But then as soon as we hired Sean, who was our amazing director, Negosian, when he came on board, he's like, guys, listen, we're budgeted for 21 and a half minutes of animation. That you have to get these scripts down to like 20, 21 pages. And for Vlas and I, those next 6 weeks were just brutal because we cut like 30 pages from the 8 episodes that we had. And you know how that is. Like, you just do the best. And there was some stuff we were still like fighting and trying to get in, but we just couldn't. It kills us because like there's 3 or 4 scenes that we dropped for her that we just would have loved to have kept. But hopefully, we'll get a second season, and hopefully we'll be able to show who she is and why she has 2 swords, and yeah. And so it's just one of those things. For the first time, like, I remember, I don't know if it was Lucas or Spielberg said that, like, you don't finish a movie, you abandon it. For the first time, I understood what that meant, because, but listen, we're just, grateful we get to play in the sandbox at all. And we hope if we get a second season, then we'll definitely jump into that more.
Well, and Dave, Charley... No, sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
He mentioned Sean Negocian, our director, and you had mentioned, the epic component was something that really stood out. And, we just have him to thank for it, because the mandate, when we had that conversation with him from the very beginning, was try to make this as cinematic as you can. And he embraced that fully. And I think that's kind of one way our show maybe is a little bit different from, say, other animes. We really treated this as a movie. We wanted to make it as cinematic as possible. So the reaction shots are there, like the Spielberg reaction shots, and that takes more time and more money to get, because you need time is money in every facet of production, whether it's animation or live action. And Sean really did a great job making this a cinematic experience, and he did that from the directorial side of things. But he also did it with the music, and he did it with the editing. So it was something that we tried to do from the very, very beginning, and I feel like we succeeded in doing that, and that's something that I'm proud of with regards to how the show turned out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys both should be. And before I jump into kind of the visuals and praise those for our last few questions here, I wanted to pick up the thread that you mentioned of some things you had to kind of leave on the cutting room floor. And I'm suddenly reminded of the Fates and the Weavers in that particular scene. Were there any other sort of deities or mythological tales? What were the toughest cuts for you guys to have to make in those edits? What was something you really wanted to see but just didn't quite make it?
We had another scene. We had like a 3 kind of scene arc with Dionysus, who is like a really cool character. Yep. We had a cool thing with Artemis that but it's just pages and shots are money, and so you just have to make choices at some point. We had asked for 10 episodes, and the one thing I will say, I don't want in any way to not sound grateful, because this wasn't an existing IP. Netflix gave us a very generous and healthy budget. When you talk to other people in animation, like, oh wow, that's pretty good. Yeah. But just we were maybe over ambitious, I think, Vlas and I, in the scope of the story we wanted to tell. And then what happens is that you write it and you kind of feel it, and some of the stuff even Powerhouse boarded, and you're like, oh no, we can't. There was a sequence with Alexia in the second episode, and I was just going to say. We called Netflix, and I said, I will put my own money to get this scene in there, please. But just in terms of let's get that animated with our post schedule, it just wouldn't have worked. But we were begging. We're like, please, we want to keep this for Alexia. But in the end, you just have to make choices. And they were incredibly supportive. And then when COVID hit and we needed a little extra, they were able to help. So I don't want in any way to seem not grateful, but there are things that we lost with other gods and another scene with the Fates that would have been fun, we think. But
yeah, and if I may add just quickly, because we're talking about this and you brought it up, and Charley mentioned the Alexia scene. As you know, you have a good scene when it does 2, 3, 4, a bunch of things. And the scene that he's talking about, it was an action scene, but it showed how smart she was. It showed how brave she was. It showed how much she cared for her men. It did 3 things, and it kept her, in the way we introduced her as this badass, and it kind of kept that thread going. And that one we lost, that one hurt, and then there was a one where we revealed her backstory. Because again, all right, she can do all these cool things, from an action standpoint, but at the end of the day, it's all about the character and delving into who they are and what motivates them. And we had that scene, and that scene also was interesting because it gave us insight into the character and also the characters that were with her. For Heron, he gained insight into her, and there was that. Her backstory actually was something that he could relate to, so it worked in that level too. But as Charlie said, we're very grateful for what we were, for the budget that we were given, and for what we were allowed to do. It's just that we are a little crazy, and maybe we just brought in too many characters. But those were the ones that got left on the cutting room floor that were they were just kind of tough to stomach.
And the one last thing I'll say, the stuff that Vlas is referring to for Alexia in 107, what we did, and it was very smart of Sean, is that we animated 108 before 107, because Sean was like, we might just kill our animators, they might be spent, and that's the big battle, and we're going to need them to still, have the energy in the tanks to really tackle that. So we actually did 108, and then 107 was our last episode, and there was some stuff with Alexia. There was 2 scenes that Vlas was referring to that we would have loved to kept in, but at that point, it was like the tanks were empty. We had to just say, okay, God willing, we get a second season, and we'll just tap out, and hopefully we can get it in future seasons if we're lucky enough to get them.
Well, I gotta say, even in scenes like with Alexia and her team kind of walking through the Deadlands, even those sort of just kind of one-on-one scenes, maybe not a lot of action happening necessarily in the moment, but having to walk through there and not look back, and the different things that pop up for each individual character, that wasn't huge on the action front, but it said a lot when it came to character. So that's one of those scenes that I kind of keep going back to when I think about the characters. So that was really well done.
Well, so that's a writer talking. That's absolutely spot on. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And then, speaking of the animation, absolutely gorgeous. It has the very familiar kind of action-packed sequences that Powerhouse has become known for, pretty much since the days of Castlevania. So how did Powerhouse first come on board? How did you guys get linked up with them?
After we sold the show to Netflix, John Derderian was the executive who bought it. He arranged for us to all sit and meet with different animation studios. And I think I can speak for Vlas that when we sat down with Powerhouse and we met Brad Graber, the CEO, and Mike Hughes, who was our producer, Brad is the perfect kind of combination of someone who genuinely cares about the art form and cares about storytelling, but he's also super organized and just you could tell right away that this guy is kind of the perfect amalgamation of creative and business, and this guy will deliver the show. And we were just really impressed by him and Mike Hughes. To be honest, but I would also absolutely. Sorry. No, go ahead. No. I'm sorry, bro. I cut you off. I didn't mean to do that. And I know Charlie agrees with this too. They had a big leg up too, because everything Charlie just said was true. But we love Castlevania too. Oh, yeah. So he was. Oh, this is the production company that did this. Castlevania, the show that we love. And and then when we met him, everything that Charlie just said, it was like, oh wow, it was almost a no-brainer. Even though the other animation studios that we met with, they were top notch. Mm-hmm. They but it was when you combine those two things, everything that Charlie said, and the fact that we both loved Castlevania, and this was the production company that produced that. Again, it was almost a no-brainer.
And I got to say, too, if you are either our listeners out there or you gentlemen haven't seen Seis Manos yet, if you haven't watched Seis Manos, Powerhouse's Mexican anime, it's so good. I wish more people would watch it immediately. I've talked to those guys a number of times about that, and I love geeking out over their original IP there. Speaking of geeking out, I
just ordered 2 Seis Manos t-shirts this week. I saw Brad posted a link. I'm like, this is great. I'll get a Silencio shirt. It's so much fun. If you are into genre mashups, and we know those guys, Dan and Al, who wrote that.
Great guy.
And I said, the little old Mexican lady, she's a lot like a little old Greek lady, and we were just kind of talking about how, even though that's very specific to their culture, right away you notice things and recognize things that are just very human. So I'm sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to jump in on that.
No, that's great, because now I know there's a new shirt for me to buy. Yeah, that's great. Speaking of being an animation nerd, this is kind of a side note, but I love that each of your episodes ends with sort of a behind-the-scenes peek. So it wasn't just a traditional credit sequence. You guys had animatics or storyboards. There was character art sort of from the design phases, showing different designs of different characters that maybe we got to see in the final form, or maybe it was slightly different, especially with some of the Titans. I can't believe I haven't talked about the incredible monstrous designs of the Titans. Do you guys nerd out over that stuff too? Or are you like me? Are you just like big animation fans getting to see all that being made and shown off?
We're big time nerds. Like, you're going to get bigger nerds than us, believe me. And we're always thinking about stuff like that. But what was also so very important was to shine a light on all these talented artists and how hard they work. You know, everyone at Powerhouse, in the Austin office and the LA office, they worked so hard. Our, character design, Katie Silva did such an amazing job. So there were different iterations of Heron, and we felt it would be interesting for the audience to see. Oh, there was the version of Heron where he was a little chubby, and then there was one where he was a little more militaristic, and then we ended up with what we did. So there's two things about that. There's one, it's interesting to see how we got to the final iteration of the character, but it was also important to share the hard work that a lot of these artists did that didn't make it into the show. And again, we can't say enough good things about the incredibly talented artists we had working on the show, from the character design to the background artists. Jesse Piles did a fantastic job, and Sean, again, Negotian, our director, just leading the charge and really paying attention to every little detail. That came down to the character design, that came down to the kills, that came down to the emotional moments, and it's, he led by example. And when you lead by example, that has an influence on people, and then people raise their game. And Sean did that. We work very hard, but Sean's probably the first person that we came across that works even harder than we do. So with regards to the credits, again, we just wanted to shine a light on the very talented people that worked on the show.
That's really what it came down to, Dave, to be honest. And the one thing is that, like, Sean had said, so what are we going to do for end credits? And then we started talking about The Mandalorian and how it was nice to kind of I'd mentioned, it's cool what The Mandalorian does. And then part of what we were just, as we were talking, I said, Sean, to be honest, like, when, Katie or Jesse send us, their work and what they're, the designs they're working on, I said, it's like Christmas morning for us. It's like so exciting to see this amazing work. And we really want to try and find a way to kind of shine a light on them and thank them. Because also, too, you have hundreds of people working on this, doing incredible work. And some people never even see their part of the product that helps make the final version.
Right.
And Sean says, oh, okay, you know what we can do? We can kind of do this montage type between, animatics and character sheets. And sometimes when those certain character sheets are up, the artist that worked on it, their name is up. And we just thought it would be just a nice thank you to them because, these people, when you work in animation, they work so hard. And we just feel blessed that we have such an amazingly talented group of artists working on this. So this was our way of saying thank you. And what was kind of cool, to be honest, it was more about saying thank you, but I think people have really responded, and they like seeing kind of behind the curtain and how, and how the kind of, sausage gets made. So it ended up being great in both regards.
It's funny, like, sometimes when you try to do the right thing, sometimes it ends up being, you get this added benefit. And so that was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I talked to Brad and the guys for Seis Manos and also Castlevania about that. I said, if they ever put together a behind-the-scenes art book or whatever with all that stuff that, you'd have to freeze frame every single frame of a Seis Manos episode to get any of it, like, I will buy that immediately. And the same goes for Blood of Zeus as well. I'm going to combo this next question. Since I haven't gotten to talk about the Titans yet, I'm going to combo this together. So talk to me a little bit about coming up with the creatures, the designs for these massive Titans and their powers, and then also maybe talk about the challenge of that massive episode to end this first season that I think ran something like 42 minutes all told with credits and stuff included. So it was like a supersized episode, right? Can you talk about how that all came together?
Yeah, the two things. The one thing I'll say, though, just about at the time, like, that is Sean, our director, using 20 years of experience in animation to squeeze every minute and inch out of the show, because, like, we delivered 45 minutes more of animation than we were budgeted for.
Right.
And now, too, part of it is we use flashbacks a lot, and so when you repeat animation, obviously that doesn't cost anything.
Sure.
But with the Giants design, part of it is you just sit down and you have these conversations. And we were talking with Sean. He said, "What do these giants look like?" And I said, "Well, listen, truthfully, Ross and I were telling him, in mythology, they were called giants, but they were the same height as the gods in some iterations. Now, again, with Greek mythology, there is not one definitive version. It isn't like the Bible where they have an ecumenical council and they sit down and they say, this is the one version. In Greek mythology, everyone attributes it to Homer. We don't even know if Homer was a real person or not. It was an oral tradition. There were, so there's different versions of myths all throughout. But in a lot of versions, the giants are described as being the same size as the gods. And part of it is we live in a world now where when you say giant, you think giant, like someone really big. But then we said, what does that look like? Are they just really tall? In other versions, they're also described as being part serpentine, almost like, Typhon. And so we kind of toyed initially, too, with this idea that maybe they're part serpentine, but that became very hard to animate. And so what we ended up landing on is that the one thing that is clear in almost every iteration of Greek mythology that you read is that when the giants were born, they were banes of the Olympians, meaning that each one was an arch enemy for a specific Olympian. Porphyrion was meant to kill Zeus, and they literally, you talk about the comic book analogies, like they were nemesis of this one. And so when we started talking about that idea, we said, well, if each one was brought into the world to kill a certain Olympian, maybe they have certain skills or animalistic qualities that will help them take out that god. And so that's how we ended up kind of saying, each one is a specific animal that could fight this god. And then we just started playing this chess game. How would you kill Hermes? How would you? And so then we just started using animal references. And that's truthfully, it's a long-winded explanation, and I apologize, but that was the thought process and how we ended up. Someone, said they were kind of very Lovecraft, and I can see that now after the fact. But it was more kind of, what nuggets or little clues from mythology can we use to try and make something that's cool for anime? I do think it's, Sean said, I don't want to see a silhouette of just 12 things that all look the same. So we got to do better than that.
Right.
And I agree with him, and that's how directors think, and I'm glad he pushed us to just keep thinking and working and getting to where we got.
I love the Bane component, and I love how Charley stated that, and I think it's true. And I think the only thing I would add was that some of the designs that we got back from Austin were just so cool. The giants look so cool. We almost, again, reverse engineered. We looked at them and we're like, okay, they didn't have a specific power when they first gave them to us. Some of them did right from Jump Street. So then it was almost like, well, this is a really cool design. What can this giant's power be? And when we kind of arrived at some of the powers that way as well as okay, this is the Bane to Zeus, or this is the Bane to Hermes, or whomever. Sometimes it was like, oh, this is a really cool design. How can we endow this with a certain power that makes sense, that could be really cool?
Yeah, and you guys never have to apologize for giving me the nerdy kind of in-depth background on character creation and mythology, because I love that stuff. And honestly, that gives me a really good excuse to go back and watch that epic battle again to see how that all kind of plays out. It really is fantastic. I mean, it's epic in scope and scale, and it's kind of the culmination of that whole story to that point. And Heron and his team, they have a part to play in it, but that's really where we as viewers get to see the gods kind of clash, and the gods kind of show off their incredible powers. They've been kind of chilling, hanging out at Olympus for a while, but now they're called into action, and it was fantastic. I mean, when Poseidon gets to just go nuts and just use the full power of the sea, I mean, it's incredible to watch. It's super fun. Before I run out of time with you guys, actually, if you don't mind talking about, maybe we've talked about the design of the giants and their kind of creation, but how monstrous of an ordeal was storyboarding that kind of final fight, or writing up, to get it to the storyboard artists to dance around that final fight? How do you decide who gets this much screen time? Did you just have a point A and a point B to end it, and you just let them kind of go wild in between? Yeah.
It was a challenge.
Yeah. Go ahead, bro.
No, I was going to say, it was a challenge. We had, I would say, big moments that we knew we had to build towards. But getting to those moments, again, I would say, I'm curious what Charley, would say. Sean just did a great job of just making it all work, because you also have so many characters, you have so many moving pieces, and it's almost like a conductor with an orchestra. You kind of need everyone to be playing the same song, and you want it to culminate to this two big moments, and one's the Zeus moment, and one is, I don't know if we're going to spoilers or not, and then the climactic moment at the end with Heron. And so there was a lot of, initially it started off, believe it or not, the sequence was longer, and then what we decided to do, and Charley was always a big proponent of this, and I totally agree with him, we had to hone it in on Heron and his gang having to find the cauldron, because then he got lost. If you spend too much time with the battling, as cool as the battle between the gods and the giants, it lost some of its the momentum, the kinetic kind of I would say the dramatic kineticness of, again, there's a mission that needs to be accomplished, and here are the stakes. So we kind of took some of those battles and we kind of said, okay, you know what, we don't need this one, we don't need that one. Let's hone in on Heron, let's hone in on Zeus, and then build to these moments, and hopefully, ultimately, have it all build to the big climactic moment with Heron there at the end. And I don't know if we're going into spoilers, the Heron and the Seraphim climactic moment.
And the one thing, too, I think really helped is that we just had a lot of experience, and then we just kept the lines of communication with Sean going constantly, because, I think the final draft of that script was like 19 pages. But obviously that's our longest episode. Right. And we always remember, Tarzan used to always tell us on Immortals, he's like, you guys can get away with so much. You could write the line, the Russian army comes over the hill. And he goes, that's like 10 words. But for me, that's 30 shots and 10 days of filming. And so, we always kind of, even though live action, and animation are different, we did know and understand that, like, what we write, we have to be very judicious. And what we did with Sean, and what we kind of had written out and then pitched to him, was that we're going to have this opening salvo of they're going to unleash the catapults, and Hermes is going to go down and make a dust storm and kind of blind the enemy, and then the chariots come down, and then the giants counter, and we see what they do, and then Zeus comes with lightning bolts, and then and then Poseidon's going to hit him with the wave,
the catapult for Heron to get behind enemy lines.
Yeah, but the one thing that we always told Sean is that if you watch and we love Lord of the Rings, we've loved the books since we were kids, and The Hobbit, but Peter Jackson on the DVDs, he talks about how they had these huge, massive scale, battles. But he found that whenever they stayed away from the core characters for too long, it just got boring, even if they had great footage. And we showed that clip to Sean, and we just said, like, that's why, like, we know we're going to have this cool stuff, and this is our chance to go full X-Men, where we see, gods against gods and gods against giants. But we have to make sure we're still threading the narrative through line as well. And so that was always just the balance, kind of trying to keep those two things. Because there's even cool stuff that we boarded that was really cool that didn't make it into the show. But it didn't make it in because we didn't need it in the end, interestingly enough. And so it's just interesting. And then the one thing I will add is that Sean knew that we were bummed out that we had to lose the stuff we had with Dionysus in the earlier episode. He was like, don't worry, I'll make it up. And you don't know how many people have said that they loved the little moment where Dionysus like spits wine in the guy's face, and like that made him like stand out. And so Sean said, don't worry, I'll get him in there. And true to his word, he found a way in this huge battle just to even make one little god stand out. And I think it speaks a lot to Sean and his creativity, because that wasn't in the script. That was just something he and his boarding team came up with.
That's too funny.
And I would say for the action, what always makes the action work, and I totally, and thank God it resonated with Sean too, to keep it on the core characters, that we care about the characters. If we don't care about them, then, the action would be, the coolest set piece you've ever seen, but it won't work unless you're rooting for the characters and really rooting. So that's the last little bit.
As I start to wrap up with you guys, unfortunately, a little bit more spoiler talk for this last episode here. The very, very end, and I'd been waiting for this pretty much the entire season. I'm like, there's one god that I haven't seen yet, and I haven't really talked about him much. We get a big reveal of the major god who's been missing the whole time in Hades. So can you talk about building to that reveal, coming up with maybe this particular character design? Because I had no clue. The whole time I was like, I wonder what Hades is going to look like. Finding the right voice. And then maybe is that a tease towards maybe more stories to come?
Charlie, I'll let you take this one.
Well, Dave, listen, we can talk for hours about where we hope to take the story and what we hope to do. And Hades is definitely a big part of it. And the great Fred Catashore, who, if anyone, really follows animation closely, he is so talented. And one of the great joys in making this show is just watching. He voices a bunch of demons. He voiced like 4 or 5 characters in the show. He's the voice of Hades, and he's so good. And again, for us, just to be clear, because people have mentioned this, and I know Netflix is only committed to this one season. Right. We hope that they'll order another one. But to be clear, we don't see Hades as a villain. Right. If you know Greek mythology, he was actually one of the more kind of level-headed ones. And that moment at the end is meant to be more kind of like a Sisyphus or Prometheus type ending where, this eternal kind of punishment that you might have to face. And the thing that you despise the most is the thing that you have to repeat over and over again. But there are clues in the first season, in shots and in moments that allude to more in the underworld and more with Hades. And that, we have so many directions and things and stories we want to tell that will involve him. And so if we're lucky enough to get, another season, Hades will definitely be a player in it, but not, I think, the way people expect him, or maybe not the Disney version where it's like he's the bad guy because he's from the underworld. Sure. And not that there's anything wrong with Disney, but I'm just talking about the old Hercules animated movie where he's the villain. But he won't be characterized like that.
No, that's interesting too. And I loved, again, we talked about the credits earlier. I love seeing the different kind of iterations of Hades and the different earrings and the tattoos and seeing that kind of come together. And I personally would love to see more. Hopefully we get to see at least the second season, whether it's your original kind of anthology idea or we get to continue adventures with Heron and company. But since I kind of have to let you guys go, as we wait for a hopeful second season, what's up next for the both of you? What else is keeping you busy these days?
We're working on an MGM pilot, so we're busy with that, and we have a couple other different projects. We have a couple features at different stages of solicitation, where we have some producers attached, and it's just interesting with regards to where we're at in the business. I still feel that we don't know what the new normal is. And I think that's being figured out. So, there has to be some clarity there. And, to be honest, we're hoping and praying that we do get that season 2, because as Charlie mentioned, we have so many characters that we want to explore, so many stories that we want to tell. We love playing in this sandbox. And we're nerds. We're always thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Wouldn't it be cool with that? And we found another nerd in Sean. So now there's 3 of us, and we're always kind of batting ideas back and forth. But yeah, that's what would you say, bro?
No, I mean, as Dave, I mentioned, we have 3 feature projects in varying degrees of development, but all of that's kind of on pause right now, to be perfectly honest. And we're just really grateful for this pilot that we're writing for MGM. It's this really cool mythology about fallen angels that we're really excited about, but that's present day. And then we have one more step on that we have to do, but that's really come together well. And then also we have this idea for a Medusa story that we just think is gold. And we just, when we finish this other script, we're just going to start writing it. There's some ideas we believe you pitch, and some ideas you think you should just write. And this one, we've been doing this profession for 15 years, and I think it's one of the best ideas we've ever had. And we just want to write it, because when you write it, then you can just tell the version you want it to tell. At least initially, it's always a collaborative process, and there's notes, and there's, but if you pitch it, then you have to, everyone then has to kind of be geared towards a target. Whereas if you just write it, it can just be what you hoped it to be, and we really think it can be, special. So, we're going to finish that. Then hopefully write Medusa, or hopefully, get a season 2 order. And so for the meantime, it's just that, and family, and playing Hades on
I was going to ask you.
On our Nintendo Switch, which is an amazing game, by the way. Everyone should check out.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting experience, because one thing too, we'll add, the first script we ever sold, we sold it to Universal. Now it was picked up in turnaround and it's at Netflix, and hopefully that's going to forge ahead too. That's a heist movie, but working in the longer format in TV and working in animation, one of the things that's been incredibly gratifying is that we're involved through the whole creative process. And for better or for worse, we got to tell the story we wanted to tell. We weren't rewritten as we were, say, on Immortals, and say how we were on Death Note. And that was very gratifying. Again, for better or for worse, we were able to tell the story that we wanted to tell. And it was just fun to, again, play in that sandbox. And as Charlie said, we would just love to create, that Medusa show, and God willing, get a season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I'm a big fan. We'll do our best here to get people watching it, talking about it. Best of luck with all the projects you guys currently have going. Best of luck with a season 2 order. I hope we get to see it as sort of a holiday surprise here at the end of the year. And just best of luck in general in the rest of 2020 and beyond. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.